They shouldn't even be able to access that file. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The entire courtroom shifted anyway. My father straightened in his seat. Too quickly. My mother's hand froze halfway to her purse. Across the aisle, my attorney stopped writing, then slowly looked at me, not confused, recalculating. The judge tapped the document once. Lightly, almost absent-minded. "But you seem to know exactly what's in it," he said. No one spoke. Not for a full 3 seconds. Then my father answered. "That was the mistake. It confirms the transfer wasn't valid," he said. "Clear, confident, automatic, and completely wrong." The judge leaned back slightly, studied him, then asked, "And how would you know that Mr. Carter?" The air in the room changed, subtle but irreversible. My mother turned toward him, just a fraction too late. My attorney exhaled, slow, controlled, then leaned closer to me and whispered, "You knew." I didn't answer. I just looked forward, because I had. From the beginning. But that moment didn't start in a courtroom. It started 2 weeks after my grandmother died. The house smelled like furniture polish and stale coffee. That combination always stayed longer than grief. People had come and gone, casseroles, condolences, church friends who spoke softly and left quickly. By the time it was just us again, the silence felt heavier than the service had. I was still staying in her room, not because anyone asked me to, because it felt like the only place that hadn't been rearranged yet. The bed was made the way she liked it. Corners tight, pillows squared. The small lamp on the nightstand still leaned slightly to the left. She never fixed it. Said it reminded her things didn't have to be perfect to be right. I sat on the edge of the bed that morning, holding her last letter. I had read it so many times the fold lines had softened. She hadn't written about the money, not directly. She had written about patience, about watching people when they thought the outcome was already decided. "People tell you who they are most clearly," she wrote, "when they think they've already won." I folded the letter again, placed it back in the envelope, then heard my father's voice in the hallway. Sharp, controlled. "Emily." I stood, opened the door. He didn't step inside. He never did. He stayed in the doorway like he always had, half present, half elsewhere. "We need to talk," he said. My mother stood behind him, arms folded, face already set. That expression told me this wasn't a conversation. It was an announcement. We moved to the kitchen, same table, same chairs. But something in the room had shifted. The familiarity was gone, replaced by something more structured, more formal. My father placed a folder on the table. Didn't open it yet. Just rested his hand on top. "We've reviewed your grandmother's estate," he said. I nodded. "Okay," a pause. Then he continued, "There are irregularities." My mother leaned forward slightly. "Significant ones," she added. I looked between them. Didn't speak, because silence invites people to reveal more than interruption ever does. My father opened the folder, turned it toward me. Legal documents, highlighted sections, notes in the margins. "According to this," he said, "you've been named primary beneficiary for multiple assets. The lake house, the small manufacturing plant outside town, several investment accounts." I read the page, slowly, carefully. Not because I didn't understand it, because I wanted them to see me take it seriously. "That's what it says," I replied. My mother's expression tightened. "That doesn't make sense," she said. "Why not?" I asked. She hesitated, then said it anyway. "Because you can't manage those things." There it was, clean, unhidden. I nodded, not agreeing, acknowledging. My father stepped in before she could continue. "This isn't about capability," he said. "It's about legality." A pause. "We believe undue influence may have been involved." I held his gaze. "Undue influence?" "Yes." Another pause. "We've already spoken to an attorney." Of course they had. "Okay," I said. My mother watched me closely, waiting, For reaction. For defense. For something emotional she could respond to. I gave her none. What does that mean? I asked. My father didn't hesitate. It means we're filing a claim. There it was. Not discussion. Action. A claim against me, I asked. Yes. For what amount? He didn't look away. Approximately 2.4 million. The number sat between us. Heavy. But not surprising. I had already seen it. Weeks ago. In a different context. In a different form. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Not retreating. Creating space. Okay, I said. That word unsettled them more than anything else I could have said. My mother blinked. You're not going to argue about what I asked. This is your grandmother's estate, she said. Yes. And you think she just gave everything to you? I think she made decisions, I replied. A pause. And I'm respecting them. My father's jaw tightened. We are too, he said. No, I said quietly. You're challenging them. Silence, not loud, but firm. My mother looked at the folder again, then back at me. You're not even going to fight this, she asked. I met her eyes. No. That was the moment something shifted. Not visibly, but internally, for all of us. Because they had expected resistance. They had prepared for it, built their strategy around it, and I had just removed it entirely. My father studied me for a moment, longer than usual, then closed the folder. All right, he said. If that's your position, it is. We sat there for another few seconds. No one speaking, no one moving. Then my mother said, You're making a mistake. I didn't respond. Because some statements aren't invitations. They're projections. I stood, pushed my chair back. I have a meeting this afternoon, I said. Not true, but not a lie either. Just a boundary. I walked out of the kitchen, down the hallway, back into my grandmother's room, closed the door. And for the first time since she died, I allowed myself to breathe normally. Not because I was calm, because I was clear. I took the envelope from the nightstand, opened it again, ran my fingers over her handwriting, then reached into the drawer beneath it, pulled out something else, small, black, unlabeled, a USB drive. The one she had given me 3 months earlier, with no explanation, just a sentence. You won't need this unless they force you to. I held it in my hand, turned it once, then placed it back in the drawer, closed it. Because I already knew something they didn't. This wasn't a fight I needed to win. It was one I needed them to misunderstand. And they already had. My lawyer thought I was suicidal. He never said it exactly like that. He was too polished for bluntness, too expensive, too trained. But by the second meeting I could see it in the way he watched me sign things without reading aloud the parts most clients stop at. Waiver of preliminary challenge. Deferral of asset freeze review. No emergency injunction request. Every page I signed seemed to unsettle him more. Not because the law was unclear, because my behavior didn't match the stakes. Emily, he said, finally setting his pen down. If you keep doing this, they'll take everything. I looked at the document in front of me, then at him. I know. That answer landed badly. I could see it. He leaned back in his chair and studied me like I had become a different kind of problem. We were in his office downtown, glass walls, muted carpet, a shelf of legal awards behind him that looked less like accomplishment and more like a warning to pay your bill on time. He had introduced himself as Martin Keene, estate litigation, aggressive strategy, excellent record. My father had probably hated him on instinct. That made him useful. When I first retained him, it was because my grandmother's pastor insisted I shouldn't walk into family litigation alone. I almost hadn't. Then I remembered the look on my mother's face when she said you can't manage those things, and I knew this wasn't just grief talking. This was hierarchy. And hierarchy, once challenged, becomes procedural. Martin opened a yellow legal pad, tapped the top page. Let me explain this again, he said. You do not need to give them psychological control just because they're your parents. That's not what I'm doing. Then what are you doing? I folded my hands in my lap. Not defensive, just still, watching. His expression sharpened. That is not a legal strategy. No, I said. It isn't. He exhaled slowly through his nose. The sound of a man trying very hard not to sound frustrated in front of a paying client. They've filed for the lake house, the plant, the investment accounts, and control over the related corporate voting rights. I know. They're arguing undue influence, diminished capacity, and improper beneficiary manipulation. I know. You seem very calm about that. I am calm. That was true. Not because I didn't understand the danger, because I did. Too well. Martin slid one of the filings toward me. Yellow tabs, highlighted paragraphs, assertions dressed as facts. I read the section naming me as a vulnerable opportunist, a granddaughter with access, a healthcare worker in a caregiving position, a young woman from a rural town who had inserted herself into an elderly woman's final decisions. The language was subtle enough to sound respectable. That's how people attack women like me, not with direct insults, with professionally formatted suspicion. Martin watched me while I read, waiting for the emotional break, the outrage, the panic. When none came, he spoke again. They are building a story, he said. Yes, and unless we start challenging the foundation of that story, it will hold. I looked up. It's supposed to hold. He blinked. That was the first moment he realized I might not be confused. Just unwilling. That makes no sense, he said. Not to you. Then help me, he said more sharply than before. Because right now I'm representing a client who appears determined to let herself be professionally dismantled by people who don't even respect her. There it was. Not elegant, but honest. I appreciated that. My grandmother respected me, I said. A pause. Then his voice softened just slightly. I'm sure she did. That's enough. He didn't answer. Because he didn't believe me. Not yet. A lot of people confuse emotional certainty with strategic weakness. They think if you care, you must also be vulnerable. They mistake quiet for surrender. My parents had made that mistake first. Martin was simply making the professional version of it. I had spent my 20s in nursing school and my early 30s in regional care work, mostly neurological rehab and long-term support. People often assumed I was soft because of that, as if caregiving and observation were opposites. As if tending to a body did not also teach you how people move when they are hiding things. My grandmother taught me the rest, not by lecturing, by living long enough to stop filtering what she saw. She had watched my parents for years, the way my father softened numbers when they benefited him, the way my mother turned preference into moral language, the way both of them believed they were practical when really they were just afraid of losing control. When Grandma was alive, they visited on holidays and during crises. I lived there. That was the difference. I knew which drawers she used, which pains she hid, which nights she pretended she wasn't dizzy because she didn't want me driving 40 minutes for medication after a 12-hour shift. My parents called it devotion when it was convenient, dependency when it wasn't. Martin interrupted my thoughts by turning another page. We need to file a challenge to the capacity claim, he said. She was sound. Yes, we can prove that. Yes. Then why won't you let me? I reached for the glass of water on the table and took one sip. Room temperature, tasteless. I didn't say I wouldn't let you. You've signed every de-escalation option I've put in front of you. Yes. Why? Because every inch they advanced made them more certain. Because certainty makes careless people sloppy. Because my grandmother's letter had not told me to fight. It told me to wait. Instead, I said, because I want them comfortable. Martin stared at me, then leaned forward slowly. For the first time since we met, he looked less irritated and more interested, comfortable enough to do what I held his gaze. That depends on how much they think they've already won. Silence settled between us. Not awkward, not empty, just shifting. Martin sat back, picked up his pen again. Didn't write, just held it. There is something you're not telling me. Yes. And that something is relevant to the case. Yes. Can I ask whether withholding it from counsel is a terrible idea? You can. He almost smiled. Almost. Then the smile disappeared. This is not a game, no. Then stop acting like the process is harmless. It isn't harmless. Then why are you so calm? I looked down at the stack of motions. The challenge notices. The valuation summaries. My parents wanted the lake house because it was visible wealth. They wanted the factory because it sounded like legacy. They wanted the accounts because numbers feel moral when written next to your own name. They believed I was attached to those things. I wasn't. Not in the way they needed me to be. Because the assets aren't the point, I said. Martin's eyes narrowed. Then what as I thought about the USB drive in my grandmother's drawer? The one I had since moved to my apartment and locked inside a fireproof box. I thought about the file buried inside it. A file she had told me never to open unless they forced the issue. A file she had described only once, not with detail. With warning. I looked back at Martin. The point is what they're willing to do when they think I'm too weak to stop them. That time he didn't answer immediately. He wrote something down, then closed the pad. I don't like this, he said. I know. I think you're underestimating the damage. No, I said. I think they are. He looked away then. Toward the window. Downtown traffic below us. People crossing intersections believing their day was the only thing in motion. After a long pause, he said, I'm going to keep pushing you to fight. That's fine. And you're going to keep refusing for now. He tapped the table once. Then nodded. Not agreement. Acknowledgement. All right, he said. But when this goes bad, you don't get to act surprised. I stood. Collected my coat. I won't, I replied. At the door, his voice followed me. Emily. I turned. If there's a trap here, he said carefully, you need to decide whether you trust me enough to stand in it with you. That was the first intelligent question he'd asked, and I still wasn't ready to answer it. The first hearing lasted 12 minutes. That was all it took for my parents' version of the story to sound reasonable, not true, not complete, but reasonable enough to hold. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No elevated drama, no sweeping speeches, just a judge, 2 tables, and people trying to sound certain. My father spoke first, measured, prepared. My mother was vulnerable in her final years, he said. She relied heavily on Emily. He didn't look at me when he said my name. That was intentional. My mother added details, small ones, carefully chosen. She managed her medications. She handled her appointments. She had full access to the house. Access. That word did most of the work. Not accusation, implication. I sat beside Martin, hands folded, still. He leaned toward me slightly. This is where we object, he whispered. I didn't move. He waited. Then whispered again, quieter, Emily. I shook my head once. He closed his eyes briefly. Then sat back. Did nothing. That was harder for him than arguing would have been. The judge listened, took notes. No reaction. That's what judges are trained to do. My father continued. We believe the estate documents were influenced improperly. A pause. We are asking for full reassessment. He said it cleanly. Like a man asking for a correction. Not a man taking something. The judge turned to our table. Ms. Carter, that was me. I stood. Yes, Your Honor. Do you wish to respond? I looked at Martin. He was watching me closely. Not angry anymore. Focused. I turned back to the judge. No, Your Honor. A small shift in the room. Not loud, but noticeable. The judge nodded once. Very well. That was it. 12 minutes. My parents walked out of that room with something new. Momentum. And momentum is dangerous when people don't understand what's underneath it. Outside the courthouse, my mother caught up with me. Emily. I stopped. Turned. She looked different here. More composed. More in control. Public space suited her. You didn't say anything, she said. No. Why not? I studied her face. Carefully. Because this wasn't about answering. It was about observing. You had something to say, she continued. I chose not to. A pause. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to. She exhaled. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I almost smiled. That sentence had followed me my entire life. Whenever I didn't fit the expected reaction. I don't think I am, I said. She looked at me for a long moment, trying to place me. But the version of me she knew didn't apply here. That unsettled her more than anger would have. We're trying to fix this, she said. No, I replied quietly. You're trying to change it. That stopped her. Not completely. But enough. My father approached then. He had been speaking with their attorney. A man in his 50s. Sharp suit, sharp eyes. He looked at me once. Quick. Dismissive. Then turned back to my father. That went well, he said. My father nodded. Yes. He believed that. That mattered. Because belief creates carelessness. Martin joined me a few seconds later. He didn't speak until we reached the car. Then he turned to me. That was a mistake. His voice was controlled, but tight. We should have challenged every one of those statements. I know. Then why didn't we? Because I didn't want to. He stared at me. You're not taking this seriously. I am. Then act like it. I opened the car door. Then paused. Martin. Yes. Do you trust me? That question caught him off guard. Not because it was complicated. Because it shifted the frame. He hesitated. Then said I don't have enough information to answer that. Fair. Then trust the part you can see, I said. Which is, that I'm not reacting. That's not evidence. It is, I said. Just not the kind you're used to. He exhaled. Then shook his head slightly. I don't like cases where I don't know the angle. I know. And I don't like losing. I looked at him. You're not losing. Not yet, he said. That mattered. Not yet. He got into the car. We drove in silence for a few minutes. Then he said something quieter. They're getting comfortable. I looked out the window. Yes. That's not good. It is, I said. He glanced at me. This is the part where you tell me why. I didn't. Not yet. Because timing matters. And they weren't comfortable enough. Not yet. Over the next week the filings increased. More documents, more claims. My parents' attorney pushed forward aggressively. Requests for control, requests for access. Each step built on the assumption that I would eventually resist. And each time I didn't, they moved faster. That was the pattern. And patterns reveal themselves most clearly when no one interrupts them. One evening Martin called me. Emily. Yes. They've requested full access to archived records. I paused. That's new. Yes. A beat. They're overreaching. I leaned back in my chair. Good. Silence. Then he said, You're waiting for something. I didn't answer. Because now, he was starting to see it. The final hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning. No delay, no extensions. By then my parents had built something that looked complete. Their filings were clean, their narrative consistent. Undue influence, diminished capacity, improper control. It all fit. Not perfectly, but convincingly enough. Martin reviewed the case with me the Friday before. He didn't sit this time. He stood by the window, arms crossed. That's it, he said. No more procedural delays. I know. They've closed every gap we left open. I know. A pause. They're going to win this. I looked at the documents on the table. Yes. He turned. That answer bothered him. Not because it was wrong. Because I said it without resistance. Emily, he said carefully, if there's anything you've been holding back. There it was. The question again. Clearer this time. I know, I said. That's not an answer. It is, I replied. He exhaled, then nodded once. Not agreement. Resignation. All right, he said. But understand this. A pause. After Monday, there is no undo. I know. He watched me for a long second, then said quietly, I hope you do. Monday came faster than expected. Courtrooms always feel colder in the morning. Not physically, structurally. Everything sharper, more defined. My parents sat across from me. Calm. Prepared. My mother wore a soft gray suit, the one she used for important events. Controlled. Respectable. My father reviewed papers he already knew by heart. That was his habit. Repetition as reassurance. Their attorney leaned in occasionally. Low voice. Final adjustments. Martin sat beside me. Still. But not relaxed. He had stopped trying to persuade me. Now he was watching. Waiting. The judge entered. Might. Everyone stood. Then sat. Proceedings began. Their attorney presented first. Structured. Efficient. He walked the court through every claim, every inconsistency, every reason the estate should be reassigned. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. Confidence carries. And right now, he had it. When he finished, the judge turned to me. Ms. Carter. I stood. Yes, Your Honor. Do you wish to contest any portion of the claim? I paused, just long enough. No, Your Honor. Martin didn't move, but I could feel the shift beside me. That was it. That was the moment everything became irreversible. Because once you don't contest, you accept structure, and structure becomes outcome. The judge nodded. Very well. The paperwork was passed forward. Final review. Final signatures. Martin leaned closer. This is it, he said quietly. I know. If you sign, it's done. I know. He didn't speak again, because there was nothing left to say. I picked up the pen. The room was quiet, not tense, certain. My parents watched, not aggressively, just assured. They believed they had already crossed the finish line. I signed the first page, then the second, then the third. No hesitation, no pause. The sound of pen on paper was the only thing moving in the room. When I finished, I placed the pen down, folded my hands, and looked forward. Still. Complete. Their attorney nodded slightly, satisfied. My father exhaled. Barely noticeable. But there. Relief. My mother didn't move, but her shoulders lowered, just enough. That was their version of celebration. Contained. Private. Certain. The judge reviewed the documents, one page at a time. Methodical. Unhurried. Then, he stopped. Just slightly longer on one page than the others. He tilted his head. Not confusion. Recognition. Then he spoke. Calm. Measured. There's a reference here, he said. A pause. To an additional file. The room didn't react immediately. Because no one expected anything to interrupt this moment. The judge continued. This file is not included in the submitted materials. Silence. Subtle. but present. He looked up, directly at my father. "Mr. Carter," he said, "are you familiar with this document?" That was the moment. The exact one my grandmother had written about. People tell you who they are most clearly, when they think they've already won. My father didn't hesitate. He answered, and everything changed. Yes. My father didn't even look at his attorney. He answered like the question had been waiting for him, like it was simple, like it was safe. The word settled in the room. Soft, but irreversible. Their attorney turned his head, just slightly, not enough to draw attention, enough to register concern. My mother's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. The judge watched them, not surprised, not reactive. Just attentive. "And how are you familiar with it?" he asked. A pause. Not long, but long enough for the wrong answer to become the only answer. It was referenced in the estate archive, my father said. Clear. Confident. Still wrong. The judge nodded once. Which archive? There it was. The second door. And they walked through it. The restricted file index, my mother added. Too quickly. Too helpful. Too late. The courtroom didn't move. But something underneath it shifted. Like a structure that had been stable until one joint gave way. Their attorney finally leaned forward. Your Honor. But the judge raised a hand. Not dismissive. Just... Enough. Counsel, he said calmly, I'll need clarification on how your clients accessed restricted estate records. Silence. This time it wasn't subtle. It spread. From the bench. To the tables. To the back of the room. My father didn't speak. For the first time that morning. My mother looked at him. Not for guidance. For confirmation. And he didn't have it. Martin shifted beside me. Not forward. Not back. Just awake. This is new, he whispered. I didn't answer. Because this was the part you don't interrupt. The judge continued. These records are not publicly accessible, he said. Nor are they included in the submitted case materials. A pause. So I'll ask again. He looked directly at my father. How did you obtain knowledge of this file? My father opened his mouth. Then closed it. That was the moment. Not when he answered the first time. When he realized the answer mattered. Their attorney stepped in. Your Honor, we may need to review. No, the judge said. Still calm. Still controlled. But firm. I'm asking your clients. That's when panic enters quietly. Not through noise. Through hesitation. My mother leaned toward my father. Barely. Whispered something I couldn't hear. He shook his head. Small. Uncertain. And then he spoke again. It was referenced in a secondary document, he said. Careful now. Less confident. But still trying to hold ground. Which document, the judge asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Their attorney's hand tightened on the table. Martin stopped breathing beside me. The room held. Because everyone understood something now. This was no longer about property. It was about access. Control. And something that didn't belong to them. I don't recall the exact source, my father said. That was the collapse. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just insufficient. The judge nodded slowly. Then turned to the clerk. Mark this for review, he said. A pause. And suspend final disposition pending further inquiry. That was it. Not a declaration. Not a verdict. But everything had changed. The momentum they had built stopped. Not because I pushed it. Because they broke it. Martin leaned closer. Emily, he said quietly, what is that file? I looked forward. Something they weren't supposed to know about. A pause. And you knew this would happen. Yes. Hi. He studied me. Really studied me this time. Not as a client. As something else. You let them walk into it. I didn't answer. Because that wasn't a question. Across the aisle, my parents sat differently now. Less certain. Less aligned. Their attorney was speaking quickly. Low. Urgent. For the first time, they were reacting. And I wasn't. The judge closed the file. Looked out over the room. This matter is no longer limited to estate distribution, he said. It may involve improper access to restricted records. A pause. We will proceed accordingly. That was the shift. Complete. Quiet. Unavoidable. I didn't move. Didn't smile. Didn't look at them. Because this wasn't a moment to claim. It was one to let settle. Martin leaned back slowly. For the first time since we met, he wasn't trying to control the outcome. He was understanding it. And understanding changes everything. We didn't leave right away. No one did. When a case shifts like that, the room doesn't empty. It lingers. People gather their papers slower. Voices drop lower. Even the air feels different. Martin closed the folder in front of him. Didn't rush. Didn't speak. That was new. He had spent weeks trying to push me forward. Now he was recalibrating. Across the aisle, my parents stood close together. Not touching, but closer than before. Their attorney spoke in short, controlled sentences. Review the record. Will respond. Do not say anything further. My father nodded. Too quickly. My mother didn't. She was watching the judge's bench, even after he had left. That told me something. She understood the shift. Not fully, but enough. Martin finally turned to me. Walk with me, he said. Not a request, not a command. Just direction. We stepped into the hallway. Courthouse hallways are always the same. Neutral colors, hard floors, conversations that don't belong to the building but stay there anyway. He didn't stop until we reached a quiet corner near a vending machine that hummed louder than it should have. Then he turned. Start from the beginning, he said. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I was thinking, because I was deciding. Trust isn't about information. It's about timing. You said your grandmother gave you something, he continued. Yes. What was it? A file. What kind of file? Restricted. He held my gaze. That's not a legal category. No, I said. It's a practical one. A pause. What's in it? I considered that. Then answered carefully. Evidence. Of what? Access. He didn't speak. Because now, he understood the shape of it. They got into something they shouldn't have, he said. Yes. And you knew they would. I knew they might. Why didn't you stop them? I looked down the hallway. People passing, conversations overlapping. Because stopping them would have protected them, I said. A pause. And I needed them to reveal themselves. He exhaled slowly. That sound had changed. Less frustration, more recognition. You let them build the case, he said. Yes. You let them win the argument. Yes. So they would feel safe enough to answer that question. I nodded. That question wasn't in the file, he said. No. It was in the system. Yes. He leaned back against the wall, closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again. You understand how dangerous that is. I do. You could have lost everything. I knew. And you still did it. Yes. A pause. Why? That question mattered. Not legally. Personally. Because I wasn't trying to win the estate, I said. I was trying to protect what my grandmother actually left me. He studied me. And that is clarity. Silence. Then, almost quietly, that's not something most clients come in here with. I'm not most clients. No arrogance. Just fact. He nodded once. I misjudged you, he said. I didn't respond. Because that wasn't something I needed confirmed. I thought you were passive, he added. I was patient. He almost smiled. Almost. That's a dangerous difference, he said. Yes. We stood there for a moment. Then he pushed off the wall. From here on, he said, we're not reacting anymore. No. We're directing. Yes. Another pause. And this time he added, I'd like to know the whole picture. There it was. The question again. But different now. Not demanding. Respectful. I reached into my bag, took out a small black drive, placed it in his hand. He looked down at it, then back at me. This is it. Yes. Everything I have. A pause. He turned it over once, then closed his hand around it. That would have been useful 3 weeks ago, he said. I nodded. It wouldn't have worked 3 weeks ago. He understood that. Immediately. Because now he was seeing the same pattern I had been watching from the beginning. They needed to believe they were right, he said. Yes. And now they've proven they weren't. Yes. We walked back toward the courtroom. Not rushed. Not tense. Just aligned. At the doors, he stopped. Emily. Yes. If this turns into what I think it will. A pause. This won't just be about the estate anymore. I know. It could become criminal. I know. He held my gaze. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my grandmother. Her room. Her letter. The way she had watched people without interrupting them. Yes, I said. Because this wasn't escalation. It was exposure. And exposure only feels like escalation to people who thought they were hidden. The estate was settled 6 months later, not cleanly. Nothing like that ever is, but clearly, and clarity was enough. By then, the case was no longer just about property. The review into restricted file access had widened quietly. No dramatic headlines, no public scandal, just subpoenas, interviews, the kind of official silence that tells you something serious is happening behind closed doors. My parents were not charged with anything I ever saw on paper. Their attorney managed that much. But the civil case they built around me collapsed completely. Not because I out-argued them, because they had built it on access they could never explain. And once that happened, no one cared about their confidence anymore. Only the trail. The assets were redistributed according to the valid estate instruments. The lake house went into a structured trust and was eventually sold. The factory was placed under board review and partial beneficiary supervision. I did not inherit control of the business. That part had always been my parents' fear, and my grandmother had understood something they never did. I wasn't meant to run the factory. I was never supposed to. What she left me was different. A savings fund, a protected educational trust, a smaller but stable shareholding position, enough to continue my career without debt, enough to step out of nursing if I chose, enough to study further, enough to become what she believed I could be. The first time Martin read the final distribution memo, he sat across from me in his office and said nothing for almost a minute. Then he looked up and exhaled. She knew exactly what she was doing. Yes, I said. He nodded slowly. She didn't leave you the factory. No, she left you the freedom to stop apologizing for not wanting it. That was the first time he said something about my life that had nothing to do with litigation. It mattered. I looked down at the memo again. My grandmother had written one final letter to be opened only if the estate entered formal dispute. Martin handed it to me in a plain envelope after the last hearing. I waited until I was home to open it. Her handwriting was smaller than before, shakier, but still hers. "Emily," it began, "if they are fighting this, then I was right to prepare you. No sentimentality, no decorative grief, just her. I know what your parents think strength looks like," she wrote. "They think it looks like management, control, possession, but real strength is knowing what is not yours to carry." I sat at my kitchen table and read that line 3 times, because that was the whole story. Not the lawsuit, not the money, the burden. Who carries what? Who assumes what? Who gets mistaken for weak simply because she does not perform force in a language others recognize? I left nursing 2 months later, not abruptly, with structure. Notice given. Patients transitioned carefully. Then I applied to the neurology pre-med program I had once told no one about because I was tired of explaining dreams before they had shape. The trust made it possible. Not easy, possible. That difference mattered too. I started classes in the fall. Older than many of the others, more certain than most. When people asked why I was there, I no longer answered with half versions. I said I'm training to become a neurologist. And then I stopped talking. That was enough. I saw my parents once after the settlement, at a family funeral. Not close family. The kind of extended relation whose death becomes an occasion for everyone to dress in muted colors and try to look respectable in grief. My mother approached first. Of course she did. She had always managed surface contact better than my father. Her posture was careful, not icy, not warm, measured. "Emily, Mom." A pause. She looked at me differently now, not admiring, not loving in any obvious way, but unprotected. That was new. As if the assumptions she used to stand behind had been taken away, and now she had to meet me without them. "You look well," she said. "I am." She nodded, then glanced toward my father who stood several feet away speaking to no one. "He doesn't know how to do this," she said quietly. "Do what?" Her eyes moved back to mine. "See you correctly." I let that sit. Because it was both honest and too late. "I'm not asking for anything," she added. Good, I thought. Because there wasn't anything left to negotiate. "I know," I said. We stood there for another moment. Then she said the only thing she could have said that meant anything at all. "She loved you very clearly." That was the closest my mother had ever come to admitting the real injury. Not the lawsuit, the misreading, the years of it. "Yes," I said. "She did." She nodded once, then stepped back. No embrace, no scene, no fake repair, just distance with truth inside it. That was enough. My father never came over. He looked at me once across the room, then away. There are people who can survive shame only by avoiding the witness to it. I let him have that, not as mercy, as irrelevance. Martin and I still speak occasionally, mostly when paperwork intersects with old legal structures around the trust. One afternoon after a meeting about distributions and educational release timing, he closed his folder and said, "You know, for a while I really thought you were making the worst decision of your life. I know. You didn't even seem offended by that." "I wasn't." He smiled faintly. "No. You were just waiting for me to catch up." "Yes." He laughed once. Then his expression changed. "You trusted them to reveal themselves." "No," I said. "I trusted what greed does to certainty." He nodded slowly. "Still one of the most unnerving clients I've ever had." "That sounds right." Then he said something quieter. "You didn't win because you were more ruthless. No, you won because you were more patient." I thought about that later in the parking lot, standing beside my car with the late afternoon sun bouncing off the windshield. Patience. People talk about it like it is passive, like it belongs to soft people with no options. They're wrong. Patience is often just discipline without performance. And that kind of discipline changes everything. If there is anything in this story that stays with you, let it be this. You do not always have to fight the way other people expect. You do not always have to prove your intelligence in the moment they insult it. And you do not have to carry what was never yours simply because your family got used to setting it down in your arms. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is wait. Watch. Let people step fully into the shape of their own choices. And then when the truth clears the room, walk forward with what was always yours.